seeing things pop up about the Titanic and how they're it's very like clickbaity, like, oh, they've discovered new things. And it's like, they haven't, but they've
No.
just like done another scan of it or, like something like that. But like, it really hasn't unearthed anything new.
Well, there's a new thing on Disney Plus coming out about it. So I think they're just trying to
Like,
drum up some
as much as they
attention.
can.
Yeah, I'm going to watch the shit out of it
Oh,
anyway.
yeah.
But no, it's never anything new. It's like, I mean, we all know what's down there. I don't think there's going to be much more
No.
at this point. I think at this point, they're just trying to see how much of it is left.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's going to be about it. But I'm looking forward to the new series because, I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, everything they're going to talk about anyway. But as a diehard Titanic fan, I feel like almost an obligation to watch it.
Yeah, I think so too. That's the thing is, like you say, you already know so much. You're basically watching however long hours of footage just to make sure there's not like a teeny tidbit you didn't know already.
Yeah, what if I learned something?
Yeah,
what if it's a big deal? It won't be. I know it won't be, but that's okay.
Just a little trinket to add to your
Yeah,
collection.
and I get to see more Titanic stuff, so like I'm pretty happy.
That's true. That's true. What else is going on in the world that I've seen? Oh, Taylor Shabusiness popped up on my TikTok the other day too.
Actually, you know what? Let's start the show.
Okay.
And then we'll talk about Miss Taylor.
Okay, cool.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dina.
And I'm Charlotte.
Welcome to the Grim Curriculum Extra Credit.
Welcome.
Taylor Shabusiness.
It's so funny. We talked about her and she was all wild and all over the place. And then I feel like everything stopped. I kind of forgot she even existed.
Me too.
And then as I was scrolling through TikTok the other day, the name Taylor Shabusiness popped up again. I was like, Shabusiness. That rings a bell. And then as I watched on, I was like, oh yes, I remember
Taylor
you.
Shabusiness. Yeah, so I debated putting a little spiel about her on today's episode, and I took it out. So I'm glad that you brought it up. Last I heard, she had attacked, I believe, a nurse.
Yeah.
She was doing this before. She attacks everybody. That is her thing.
She'd be lashing out in every direction.
She's trying to get an appeal done, saying that when she killed her boyfriend, that she was just insane. So she wants to get out on the count of insanity.
It's like, no, sweetie.
Yeah.
You get off. Like you don't get the death penalty because you're insane, but you don't get released.
No, you're not going anywhere,
insane.
girl. But from what I hear, she is as crazy as ever. She is as aggressive as ever. And she's really not changing other than just getting worse and worse because she's hoping that if her behavior is terrible, that they won't put her to death.
Craziness.
But she is a terrifying human being.
Yes, she's certainly one that I would be going into a fight with against my will for sure. Yeah, no thank you. And if I were her prison cellmate, I'd also have concerns as well.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming she doesn't have a cellmate.
I don't think at this point she does. And the thing to remember about her is she's younger than us. Like, she is young, and that's what's so scary.
I mean, I've met some crazy young people in my time. Even the other day, Cody and I were reminiscing about the high school days, and I'm not from a very big high school. And I said, you know what? There's not too many people that intimidate me, but there's certainly a couple of girls back in high school that I, to this day, still would not mess with.
See, and I had kind of the opposite where I went to a huge high school. And it wouldn't be too strange to be standing in the hallway and just witness like a crazy brawl. Like, that's just
absolutely
people. Though, when you're that age and you don't, your brain's not fully developed and whatever, like, you got nothing to lose.
No, exactly. There's really no consequence at that age. And some people, some human beings, don't learn that even into their adult years, where they be acting a certain way and you're like, whoa. Well, I didn't think adult human beings had level 9 temper tantrums like that, but I guess we do.
The Taylor Shabusinesses of the world.
Yeah, she's in the find out era of her life, I think.
I have a feeling this will not be the last time we talk about her.
No.
I wouldn't be shocked if she kills someone while she's incarcerated.
Oh, I wouldn't either. Absolutely not. I think if she got her hands on someone and she thought for whatever reason that would work in her favor, even though it's absolutely not, she's being counterproductive for sure. Of course
she is, yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be stepping out around her in the the event that she decided to make an example of me,
No.
yeah, no.
All this stuff with her in the news again, I rewatched the video of her attacking her lawyer in
Oh
court,
my
and I was
god.
just like, "That's all I need to see. That
Yeah.
is all I need to know about this girl." Like, she is a little firecracker.
No kidding. But anyway, yeah. Well, I'm sure she will sort of disappear into the ether again,
Mhm.
only to come up again probably in a few months' time when inevitably something else has
In
happened.
a big way, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we're calling it now.
Oh, well, frick.
I have our first story of the day.
Yes.
It is not true crime, but it is science related,
Oh, well, I
and I
love that
thought you
either
would
way.
like it. There we
Yes,
go.
absolutely.
All right, so I wanna talk a little bit about dire wolves.
Oh, okay. I've heard this pop up recently.
This
Yes.
is fascinating.
Okay.
So, for those of you who don't know, the dire wolf once roamed an American range that extended as far south as Venezuela and as far north as Canada, but not a single one has been seen in over 10,000
Mhm.
years when the species went extinct. With that, it presented an opportunity for a company called Colossal Biosciences.
Colossal.
Mhm.
Sounds very
It
intimidating.
does. Relying on deft genetic engineering and an ancient preserved DNA, they have deciphered the direwolf genome, rewrote the genetic code of the common gray wolf to match it, and using domestic dogs as surrogate mothers, brought Romulus, Remus, and their 2-month-old sister Khaleesi into the world in 3 separate births last fall and this winter, effectively for the first time de-extincting the line of animals whose gene pool vanished long ago.
So they're playing Jurassic Park, but just with mammals, not lizards.
Well, they're gonna try
Oh,
apparently.
I'm
Just
sure they will.
wait.
I'm sure they will. There'll be someone out there injecting T-Rex DNA into chickens, I have no doubt.
Oh, absolutely. So, Colossal was founded in 2021. They currently employ 130 scientists and they want to bring back various species. So, on their de extinction wish list is the woolly mammoth,
Okay.
the dodo, and the Tasmanian tiger. So, March of this year,
Mhm.
they were able to copy mammoth DNA to create something called a woolly mouse, which is basically a mouse that has the coat and the accelerated fat metabolism of the woolly mammoth.
Holy cow, so they've taken those particular genes and injected them into a mouse to see if that's gonna
And it
work.
worked.
Holy
And these
cow.
things are very cute. I highly recommend looking at a picture. They're like
Aw.
cute little like golden colored mice.
Oh
Like
my
they're
god.
adorable. So they're claiming that the same techniques they use to summon back species from the dead could prevent existing but endangered animals from slipping into extinction themselves. What they learn restoring the mammoths, they say, could help them engineer more robust elephants
Okay.
that could survive the ravages of a warming world.
See, this was gonna be my question is, are we just doing it because we can, or are they saying that there is going to be benefits to this? Because I can imagine sort of your classic mad scientist being like, "Hey, hey, hey, I'm going to bring it back." But then what's the goal? But you've said they're trying to bring certain
Mhm.
things back in the hopes that it could benefit either existing species from going extinct or to help them get through, the crap we're dealing with climate change
I
and all
have
that
a
stuff.
really hard time understanding what benefit we could have to bringing back a woolly mammoth. Because I mean, a mouse, okay, a wolf,
Mhm.
but a full ass woolly mammoth, like, first of all, where are you going to put them?
Well, that's the thing. I'm like, are we gonna have woolly mammoth farms? Because for some folks, like we have bison farms here, which sounds pretty
Yeah.
preposterous, but here it's a very normal thing. There's even like elk farms and
Hmm.
stuff like that too. So it's not out of the norm to have what you might consider a wild animal as a
Hmm.
domesticated herd species that's being farmed. But yeah, what's the purpose? Are we going to be eating mammoth meat? Like,
I could see it happening. So the colossal chief science officer named Beth Shapiro has said, "We are an evolutionary force at this point. We are deciding what the future of these species will be." And she suggests that 30% of the planet's genetic diversity will be lost by 2050. So that's one of the reasons why they're doing this.
okay.
They're framing the technology not just as a moral good, but a moral imperative. And she's saying that for humans, because we've driven so many species to the brink of extinction, it's a good way for them to get square with nature.
I see, sort of as a way of giving back for destroying so much over the years. I
Exactly.
see what you're saying.
So with that, there are some concerns, obviously.
Yes.
The newly introduced species could become invasive.
Yeah.
And they're talking about an exotic pet, for example, escaping and then
Mhm.
decimating the native species. They're comparing it to a toad being brought in to kill off beetles and then killing off the marsupials that eat the toads and then
Exactly.
overpopulating themselves.
Yes.
This is nearly 30 years after Dolly the sheep was cloned.
Yep.
And they're saying that with her, there were a lot of problems, such as large burst size, organ defects, premature aging, and immune system problems. And they're
Mhm.
saying that the cloning can be really hard on the surrogate mother.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't even really thought about that.
Yeah, so Robert Klitzman, who is the professor of psychiatry and director of the bioethics master's program at Columbia, he
Mhm.
said there's a risk of death, there's a risk of side effects that are severe, there's a lot of suffering involved in that, and there are going to be a lot of miscarriages.
Oh, wow.
But colossal scientists are saying that they're onto something powerful. They're saying that there's a huge significance, especially when it comes to Romulus, Remus, and Khaleesi.
Mhm.
There was staff that were weighing them when they were 6 weeks old, and they were singing a song from The Little Mermaid, and when she reached a point where she vocalized first up, then down, the wolves began mimicking her. So
Oh.
these animals are quite bright.
Yes, no kidding. Now, okay, so just to clarify, a dire wolf, I mean, the only reference I really have for this is Game of
Mhm.
Thrones, and even then, not that much because I didn't even watch Game of
Yeah,
Thrones. So, are they just like a much bigger version of what we're used to? Or,
essentially, yeah.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, the writer of the Game of Thrones books,
Mm,
George R.R. Martin,
yes.
he was actually able to see them and hold them as well.
Well, that seems very appropriate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And actually, I saw a thing that said that he was able to actually see and hold the formerly extinct species before he actually finished the last book, which I thought was kind of
That
funny.
is hilarious.
So, with the direwolves, basically what they had to do was make 20 edits in 14 genes in the common gray wolf,
Okay.
but they gave rise to a host of differences, including a white coat,
Okay.
larger jaws, more powerful shoulders, wider head, larger teeth, more muscular legs, and characteristic vocalizations.
Okay.
Now, with all of this came a warning
Yes.
from the Toronto Zoo CEO. He said that the resurrection of the dire wolf is an extremely dangerous move that comes with enormous risk,
I would imagine.
which I definitely think so.
Mhm.
He said this is real DNA from the extinct dire wolf that's been put onto living wolves. They took 20 different genes from the extinct one and put it back into a wolf. But if I took 20 genes out of an African wild dog and I put those into a Labrador retriever, it would still be a Labrador retriever.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, exactly. He's
Absolutely.
saying that it's not necessarily fair to call these animals full-on dire wolves, even though they do have some pieces of the breed's DNA spliced into them.
Okay, yeah.
And he's saying that I'd actually suggest this is the return of the circus. It's really doing some gene editing to hit a few phenotypes, the pieces of how the animal looks, and putting it back on the ground. And gray wolves being the key player in this story using their genetic material.
Well, actually, you know what? It's funny too because if you remember quite a few episodes ago, I talked about a fella, I believe in Montana, who was breeding these very interesting sheep that were really
Yes.
big.
Yeah.
He was actually sentenced very recently
Mhm.
as well, I believe to 6 months in prison. He was arrested and charged for messing around with the genomes of sheep and things
Mhm.
like that. And then on the other hand, you have this company that's going a little bit further. I mean, maybe to most of the world, a sheep is pretty boring. The particular fellow that was doing the sheep altering, if you will, was breeding them for hunting
Yeah.
purposes, so that people could basically come track down and hunt a bigger, badder mountain sheep.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was arrested for it. But these guys are just going for it and doing it with Tasmanian tigers, dire wolves, things like that too. So really, what's the difference?
The difference is that this company is being funded by a
Yeah.
large group of very, very rich people, including some famous billionaires as well as celebrities.
Interesting.
So suddenly you have this funding behind you, you have this legitimacy behind you, and then it's
Yeah.
okay. So with the wolves, they are roaming around in an undisclosed secure location in the US. They live on about 2,000 acres, and what they're gonna do is just see what happens with them, let them live out their lives. They're probably gonna see if they can breed or not, because
Mhm.
a lot of these animals that are even spliced when you take, like, a lion and a tiger to make a
Yes,
tiger.
they're sterile, they can't
Exactly.
pass along those genes, it's the same thing with mules and
Yeah.
stuff like that too, yeah.
So they're gonna let them live and see what happens. Same thing with the mammoth mice. They're
Mhm.
gonna see what happens to them, just kinda let them live out their little lives and go from there. I think this is the beginning of something.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really what this boils down to, and I'm curious to see where this is going to land us, because at the end of the day, again, a wolf is a wolf, but what happens if and when we have mammoths that are living here again? Or if they go ahead and they say, "Well, why not make some dinosaurs?"
Exactly, and then if you wanna get tinfoil hat about it, you start tiptoeing into, like, Spider-Man territory, and it's like, "Oh, when are we gonna be mixing lizard DNA with human DNA, right? So
Exactly,
we
yeah.
can grow back our limbs," like,
Mhm.
and then you have that happening all over New York City.
I mean, honestly, like I said, I think this is the start of something very significant,
Mhm.
and I'm very curious to see what happens.
Yeah, me too. It is again interesting how sort of one man's genetic experiment lands you in jail,
Mhm.
and one man's ends you probably having books and stuff written about you. So
No, one of the main guys was on Joe Rogan, so
that does not shock me in the slightest. I do have, unfortunately, some local news, but also some pretty hard to hear news at the same
Mhm.
time. So, for you guys that are local to Edmonton and Alberta, you may remember this from a couple of years ago, back in 2022. A US man exploited a girl from Edmonton. I believe she was 13 at the time. As of April 8th, 2025, he has been sentenced. He ultimately signed a plea deal. Basically, back in 2022, after he was corresponding with her for quite some time, grooming her, he ended up coming up to Edmonton, taking her back to Oregon, where she went through the most nightmarish time. This
Mhm.
man sexually assaulted her. It was all sorts of fucked up and horrible. But Noah Medrano, the man in question, has pleaded guilty to 2 of 6 federal charges in Portland in January. And according to those court documents, the charges were sexual exploitation of a child and transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. He has been sentenced to just under 25 years, as he fucking should
Mhm.
be. The prosecutor in the case did ask for the life sentence. The defense was asking for 292 months, which, when you first hear it, you're like, well, that doesn't sound like much. It is just under 25 years.
Okay,
So it
yeah.
was like life sentence or just under 25
Mhm.
years, more or less the same thing. The 13-year-old girl was reported missing in Edmonton of June of 2022, and they did find her in an Oregon hotel room 9 days later. He had coerced her into his vehicle in front of her school as she got off the school bus.
And I believe they were corresponding on Snapchat.
Yes, something like that. At the sentencing hearing on Tuesday, very recently, the court heard victim impact statements from the girl's father, sister, mother, and the victim herself, which crazy how strong you have to be.
Mhm.
Her mother said, "The abuse my daughter suffered is unbearable to comprehend. The damage caused by these horrific events is complex and irreparable." The girl's father called Medrano scum and called for the maximum sentence to be imposed. He said, "You deserve no clemency for your actions, and your lack of remorse is clear. Men like you cannot be changed. You are wired incorrectly."
Wow.
The victim delivered her own impact statement, noting that she was speaking for all victims of sexual violence who are seeking justice. She said, "I remember the endless nights of abuse. He would drug me in his vehicle before waking up in a hotel room." And she read poems that she had written as she worked through the trauma of what had happened to her. He then was allowed to address the court, and he goes, I am not a violent man, and I did not use force on the minor victim."
Wow.
I'm sorry, coercing a 13-year-old girl and then
Mhm.
trafficking her across not only state lines, but
Yeah.
international lines, I might point. He said, "I was only trying to help her, but I'm aware that those actions were wrong," and he apologized.
Hmm.
But, I mean, he's stating that he knew what he was doing was wrong.
You know, I'm almost glad because when I first read this, my initial thought was, I'm very happy that he was sentenced in the States and not Canada.
Because unfortunately, as we've talked about many times before,
Mhm.
the Canadian legal system tends to be fairly lenient on sex offenders and
Mhm.
things like that, unfortunately,
Yeah.
just because of this the way the system is a lot of the times. And sometimes with the sentencing that comes, most people are very fucking disappointed.
Oh, absolutely.
So for him to be charged to 25 to life in the States
Yeah.
makes me feel a little bit happier. Apparently, he continues to maintain a story that is a complete lie about what happened. He's still
Mhm.
sort of convincing himself, I guess, that he was trying to help her. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, she's gonna be moving on with her life. He's been sentenced to 25 to life, and I hope he rots and we never hear from him ever
Absolutely. I
again.
remember when all of this was happening.
It was
It was,
crazy.
yeah, and then they found out that she was in the States and they were
Yeah.
just like, "Holy shit."
I
Like,
remember the Amber Alert and everything
yeah.
going off on my phone
Mhm.
and then it all unraveling, and so I'm sad that it takes so long always, like 3 years later, here
Yeah.
we are, but I'm glad in this particular case that justice was somewhat served.
I'd rather have it take longer and see a sentence like this than have it be a quick trial and have him out in 5 years.
100%,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think he's getting out, for parole anytime soon,
No.
let's put it that way.
Especially if he's not accepting any accountability.
Exactly.
I have a very different story about a 13-year-old.
Okay.
Very different. So a mom of 3
Okay.
has allegedly been murdered
Oh.
by a 13-year-old girl. She had stab wounds to her face, neck, and back.
Was this in the UK?
This was in the UK.
Okay, I believe I heard of this very recently, so I'm glad you're talking about it.
This is crazy. So they're saying that she was killed by the 13-year-old. She was found with all those wounds. She was 43 years old. Her
Oh,
name was Marta Bednarzak, and she was found with multiple wounds after a house fire and was pronounced dead in Wellborough, Northamptonshire at around 3:30 a.m. on March 10th.
holy cow.
Her cause of death was determined to be the stab wounds, and there are further tests that we're still waiting on the results for. Her body has not been released yet, and the inquest hearing is set to take place on October 8th.
Holy cow, that's still quite a ways from now.
Yes, so they're not naming the teenager,
Mhm.
obviously.
Yeah.
She's charged with murder and arson with an intent to endanger life. She's being held in detention and has not yet entered any plea. The BBC reported at the time that she was clutching a teddy bear during her initial hearing,
Oh my god.
and police gained access to the property and then they found the body. This is a horrific, horrific case. Like, this is just so incredibly sad. She was very loved. One of her family members said Marta was the matriarch of our family. She was a very caring woman, a loving mother, and a supportive friend who could never do enough for those she loved. She immigrated from the UK from Poland back in 2012 and worked in a warehouse in order to bring money home from her family. She also has a long term partner, Eugene, to whom she was engaged to.
Oh, that's so sad.
They also said she was so loved by all of us, and the tragic circumstances in which she died will haunt us forever. We don't think we'll ever come to terms with it. We are heartbroken at the thought of never seeing our lovely Marta again. She will be missed beyond words, and she will never be forgotten.
Do we have any kind of motive for
It
this?
doesn't really look like it.
So this 13-year-old just stabbed this poor woman to death.
This is very early on,
Yeah.
so there isn't a lot of information that's out. I read something that, they had found diary entries
Oh
about her saying she
boy.
was gonna do it, but that hasn't been fully verified, so I didn't necessarily want to include that.
Yeah.
We don't know a ton about this kid.
I was
There
gonna say, do we even know, like, how they were known to each other already, or were they known to each
I
other?
haven't found that.
Oh my goodness. I guess, yeah, this is really unraveling then as we go
Yeah,
along. Holy cow, 13-year-old.
13.
I mean, it's unfortunately and tragic that this sort of thing is not unheard of.
Mhm.
We've talked about one of our I think the second case we ever covered was the case of Mary Bell,
Yeah.
which was the case of a 10-year-old murdering another child,
Yeah, 2 boys.
2 boys, which is just mind-boggling obviously on its own.
Mhm.
Um, but then to have a 13-year-old against a 43-year-old,
And
I
the thing
just
is too, this isn't just shooting somebody.
no.
'Cause I think shooting somebody, it can be a very impersonal crime.
Well, and for a kid, maybe you've seen it on TV or you've seen it
Yes.
in video games, and this is not the video games are violent argument, so don't
No,
even
no,
start
no,
me
no,
on
no.
that, but it's that you see it and you play it in games, and it's I mean, if any of you have been to the range and fired a handgun,
Mhm.
it's very easy to do so,
Oh,
and,
absolutely.
point and click, literally, and so for a kid, sometimes you can understand that, you hear of even toddlers picking up guns and
Yeah,
accidentally shooting someone in the States and, things like that, but I don't know, to stab someone, that's a very personal,
it
very
is
close up thing to do.
multiple times, and then to go as far as to set the house on fire afterwards.
So that to me, and again, very speculative and whatnot,
Mhm.
but that to me says, okay, so you know what you did was wrong
Yeah.
and you tried to hide it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess we'll see how this is gonna go.
Yeah. We'll keep you guys posted with that one. Again, this is very early. It looks like it won't go to court again until October, but we'll keep y'all in the loop and see where this heads because I am very curious for more information.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, I have not a story by any means, but a very important true crime person, I
Mhm.
think, and one of the good guys this
I
time.
love it.
So I want to talk a little bit briefly about the wonderful Lois Gibson. She's an American forensic artist and she holds the 2017 Guinness World Record for most identifications by a forensic artist. She has solved something like, I believe it's 1,266
Wow.
cases
Holy
by
crap.
her drawing. It's absolutely amazing. She also drew the very first forensic sketch shown on America's Most Wanted, which helped identify the suspect and solve the case.
Wow.
She teaches at the University of Texas at Austin, teaching forensic art
Mhm.
because I think for forensic artists in the US, I believe there's less than 30. And because
Wow.
it is such a niche group of people, they're
Yeah.
all known to each other. They all know each other,
Yeah.
obviously. But she thinks it's very important because of the ability to solve cases. She's like, we need more forensic sketch artists out there.
Mhm.
So she teaches, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Her career start into being a forensic artist unfortunately started very violently, kind of what inspired her to get into it. When she was 21 and living in LA, Los Angeles, she was working as, I believe, a model and a dancer. And unfortunately, she was the victim of a horrific and violent rape. And after that, she went and got her fine arts degree from the University of Texas at Austin, where she teaches. And yeah, like I said, she has helped solve 1,266 crimes as of 2012. So
Oh,
she's
so mu
probably solved
yeah.
even more since then. She's
That's a
in
hero.
her 70s now. She is the author of the true crime book Faces of Evil with writer Deanie Francis Mills. So they wrote a book about the things she's solved. She is an absolute icon in the true crime world,
Yeah.
and I think she was worth just mentioning very
I
briefly
love it.
because often when we're talking about the heavy hitters of the true
Mhm.
crime world, it's not in a good way. And there are some true heroes out there. And actually, just to finish up, this is fun. In 2018, she worked with adult film star Stormy Daniels
Mhm.
to create a composite sketch of a suspect that Daniels alleges threatened her in 2011 in a parking lot in Las Vegas to keep quiet about her affair with President Trump, and they were
Ooh.
able to track down the person that threatened her because of
Wow.
her description and the composite sketch.
That I always find that so impressive that you can describe what someone, especially
Yes.
because they coach you and they say, "Well, let's talk about the eyes," and they're so correct so much of the
Yes.
time, it's amazing.
The other cool thing with her as well is through all of this, she has realized that certain markings or skin imperfections or
Mhm.
scars can be very, very important when it comes to
Mhm.
identifying someone. She has not only gone as far as to teach more people about the composite sketch artistry, but she's actually working with dermatologists to help identify different moles, different
Oh,
scars,
wow.
even to go as far as to say, like, oh, this person had a scar on their face. Well, what color was the scar? How old do we think it
Mhm.
was? How do we think this scar was caused? And even through that, they've been able to track people down because of it.
That's
So
amazing.
she's making leaps and bounds in the investigative world, and I think that's just fantastic. So yeah, big shout out to Lois Gibson. She's amazing.
Hell yeah. That brings us to our latest strange and unusual death. This is part of a topic that I'd love to do an episode on one day.
Okay.
We are going to talk about spontaneous human combustion.
Okay, I was fascinated with this as, like, a
Me
teenager. I, like,
too.
read all into it and
Yeah,
everything because it's yeah, it's one of those wild and wacky
it really
things.
is. So I want to talk about Mary Hardy Reeser, who died July 2nd, 1951 in
Okay.
St. Petersburg, Florida. Her death was surrounded by mystery and even controversially reported at the time to be a case of spontaneous human combustion.
Mhm.
She was often referred to as the Cinder Lady in
Oh,
newspapers of the day.
brutal.
Yes. So at roughly 8 a.m. on July 2nd, 1951, her landlady arrived at her apartment with a telegram. Trying the door, she found the metal doorknob to be uncomfortably warm to the
Oh,
touch and she called the
no.
police. Reese's remains, that were largely in ashes, were found among the remnants of a chair in which she had been sitting.
Mhm.
All that remained of her was her part of her left foot, which still had the slipper on it.
Yes, and I think there's pictures of
There are
this.
very famous pictures of this.
Yes.
Her backbone and her skull. Plastic household objects at a distance from the seat of the fire were softened and had lost their shapes. Her skull had survived and was found among the ashes, but shrunken to the size of a teacup.
Whoa. To shrink bone?
That's very hot.
No kidding.
Yeah. A description disputed by a fire researcher who was in Brandenton for a conference at the time who saw the scene. He was trying to dispute this whole teacup thing. So
Okay,
it's something that's still a little bit controversial
got
about this
it.
story. On July 7th, St. Petersburg police chief sent a box of evidence from the scene to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. He included glass fragments found in the ashes, 6 small objects thought to be teeth, a section of the carpet, and the surviving shoe. He also included a note saying, "We request any information or theories that could explain how a human body could be so destroyed and the fire confined to such a small area and so little damage done to the structure of the building and the furniture in the room that was not even scorched or damaged by smoke."
Well, that's always my big question when it comes to spontaneous
Yeah.
human combustion, because if you don't believe in the fact that this person just burst into flames by themselves, which, like, whether or not you believe that is a whole other
Mhm.
thing, but if this person set themselves on fire on purpose or by
Mhm.
accident, how were they able to only burn themselves
Exactly.
and that small surrounding area? To burn human bone, I think it's something like 3,000 degrees
Mhm.
Fahrenheit. To be that hot would bring down the rest of the building
Oh,
you were in.
absolutely.
The whole thing would be in flames. So, really, the question is, how doesn't it spread?
So the FBI had a theory that they released.
Yeah.
They said that she had been incinerated by something called the wick effect. She was a known user of sleeping pills, and they hypothesized that she had fallen unconscious while smoking and
Mhm.
set fire to her clothes. The FBI said once the body starts to burn, there is enough fat and other flammable substances to permit varying amounts of destruction to take place. Sometimes this destruction by burning will proceed to a degree which results in almost complete combustion of the body. Her daughter in law said the cigarette dropped to her lap. Her fat was the fuel that kept her burning. The floor was cement and the chair was by itself. There was nothing around her to burn.
Fair enough. I mean, if we're talking, well, it depends. Yeah, if it was, say, some sort of big concrete condo building,
Hmm.
then maybe I could see it. But still, I just like, you're telling me, like, the curtains didn't catch that heat or
At
anything?
least get smoke damage. It's the
Yes.
smoke damage that gets me. That's what I don't
Exactly. Well,
understand.
because anyone that's been in a fire will tell you, when you come back into that space, whatever's left, everything is covered in
Yep,
soot.
everything is destroyed.
Everything is coated. So that's another
Yeah.
question. So then do you get your Sherlock Holmes hat on and say, was she burned elsewhere and then planted here?
Hmm.
You start to wonder about staging and things like that, but we'll never really know, I don't think.
Spontaneous human combustion. I would love to do a series on it.
Let's do an episode.
Let's do it.
I think that would be a good, I mean, as much as it's a morbid and kind of unfortunate topic, I think that would be a good palate cleanser sometime.
I agree. A horrific little palate cleanser
We'll add
like
it
we
to the list.
often want to do.
Yeah, exactly. We'll add it to the list.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Grim Curriculum.
Extra credit.
Bye.